The ballroom of the Global Leadership Forum in Geneva was supposed to be a display of polished diplomacy, staged smiles, and carefully controlled egos. Instead, it became the one place on Earth where two worlds, one dying, one rising, collided with the force of a storm. Donald Trump entered the hall like it belonged to him, chin high, chest out, absorbing the attention as if the cameras were oxygen. He loved stages like this: chandeliers, velvet curtains, an audience waiting for a show. It reminded him of rallies, where he controlled every breath and every cheer. But that night, something was different, because in the front row sat a man who wasn't impressed. A man who didn't clap. A man who didn't bow. Ibrahim Traoré. He sat with the calm of someone who had already survived everything the world could throw at him: coups, sanctions, threats, and assassins. His beret was neatly placed, his uniform sharp, and his expression unreadable. He didn't look at Trump with admiration. He looked at him like he was studying an artifact from a collapsing world. And Trump hated it. The moderators tried to introduce the panel, but Trump cut them off. He stood abruptly, gripping the microphone like it was a weapon. "Let me be very clear," he boomed, pointing across the room. "Some people here need to remember their position. Their place. The United States built the world they're standing on." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras zoomed in. Trump wasn't hiding the target of his attack. Traoré. Trump slammed a hand on the podium. "Countries that lecture us now, countries that owe everything they have to American power, should show respect. Especially those run by soldiers who forget where they came from." All eyes turned to Traoré. But he didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't even shift in his seat. He simply rose. Slowly. Calmly. With a presence that silenced even Trump's loyalists. The air tightened as he walked to the microphone, every step echoing through the hall. He took the mic with one hand, looked Trump dead in the eyes, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Mr. Trump," he said, "you told me to know my place." A pause. Then, with a slight, dangerous smile, "I burned that place down." The room erupted, half in shock, half in awe. Trump's face twisted in disbelief. The moderators froze. The camera zoomed so close they could capture the tremor in Trump's jaw. Traoré wasn't done. "America didn't build our place," he continued. "It built the walls that tried to contain us. And we tore them down ourselves." The hall was no longer a ballroom. It was a battlefield. Trump wasn't used to silence, especially silence directed at him. For a moment, his mouth hung open, fingers gripping the podium like he needed it to stay standing. The audience, packed with presidents, diplomats, CEOs, and reporters from every major network, leaned forward as if history had paused mid-breath. Traoré remained still, hands resting lightly on the podium, eyes locked on Trump with a calmness that felt like a threat all by itself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. His presence alone was a counterpunch. "You speak of power as if it belongs only to you," Traoré said. "As if leadership is inherited. Like a family heirloom passed around wealthy hands." His gaze swept across the room. "But real leadership is earned in the dirt. In the struggle. In the fire of nations fighting to stand on their own feet." Trump forced a laugh, loud, awkward, too sharp. "Fire? You talk tough for someone whose country." Traoré cut him off without raising a single decibel. "Do not mistake humility for weakness. Africa is humble, but it is not weak. Burkina Faso is small, but it kneels to no one." Several African leaders nodded subtly. Reporters typed furiously. Camera shutters clicked like rain. "You claim America built us," Traoré continued. "But America built its wealth on African minerals, African labor, African suffering. You built your towers on our gold, your industries on our uranium, your influence on our silence." A murmur rolled through the room. "And when we finally speak," Traoré added, "you tell us to know our place." He leaned closer to the microphone. "We know it now. It's not behind you. It's not beneath you. It's beyond you." The room erupted again, some in applause, others in stunned disbelief. Trump's face turned a deeper shade of red, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Traoré finished with calm authority. "You warned me to stay in line. But Africa has no line to stay in. We draw our own path now. Trump tried to interject, but his microphone cut out, whether by accident or design, nobody could tell. The symbolism wasn't lost on the audience. Traoré simply stepped back, leaving Trump speechless under the harsh lights. Trump finally managed to get his microphone working again, smacking the side of it with a frustrated grunt. His voice blasted back into the speakers, louder and shakier than before. "You think talking big makes you strong?" he barked. "The United States could shut down your entire country in a day. With sanctions. With trade. With..." Traoré tilted his head, studying him like a surgeon preparing an incision. "With tweets?" he asked calmly. Laughter exploded across the hall, uncontrolled, involuntary, electric. Even some American delegates covered their mouths. Trump's face twitched, his confidence cracking like thin ice under a boot. Traoré didn't smile. He wasn't joking. "You think power is the ability to threaten smaller nations," he said. "But that's not power. That's insecurity wearing a suit." Trump jabbed a finger toward him. "You don't understand how the world works. And you," Traoré said, "don't understand that the world is changing." A hush fell again. "In your era," he continued, "Africa was expected to obey, to quietly accept whatever the West demanded. But we are not the Africa of your speeches. Not the Africa of your imagination." He stepped forward slightly. "You say you can collapse us in one day. But ask yourself, what collapses if Africa stops supplying the minerals that power your phones, your planes, your satellites, your electric grid?" Trump's mouth tightened. "What happens to America," Traoré said, "when Africa stops bleeding for it?" Several leaders shifted nervously. It was a truth many knew but few dared to speak. "And one more thing," Traoré added. "If your idea of strength is intimidating vulnerable nations, then you're not a leader. You're a bully." Trump scoffed, "I've dealt with tougher people than you." Traoré didn't blink. "And yet, you're shaking." The cameras caught it, the slight tremor in Trump's left hand. It wasn't rage. It was fear disguised as outrage. "You told me to know my place," Traoré said, voice steady as stone. "I burned that place down because it was built for my silence. I built a new one where Africa speaks for itself." He paused. "And that's what threatens you." Trump turned away, pretending to look at his notes, but everyone saw it, a retreat. Trump straightened his tie, forcing a smirk back onto his face as if he hadn't just been cornered in front of the entire international press corps. He leaned into the microphone again, voice dripping with forced bravado. "You talk like you're some kind of hero," he said. "But you're just a small country president trying to look big on the world stage." Traoré raised a single eyebrow. "Small country? Then why does your voice shake every time you mention us?" A ripple went through the room like a gust of wind shifting the crowd's mood. Trump opened his mouth, but Traoré kept going. "You think the size of land determines strength. You think GDP numbers tell the story. You think flags and military parades make a nation powerful." He shook his head. "No, power is measured by the courage to stand alone when the world demands your obedience." Trump jabbed back quickly, "You're isolating Africa. You're pushing away partners." "Your partners?" Traoré cut in. "Or leeches." Silence. Sharp. Heavy. Trump blinked, caught off guard. Traoré stepped closer to the podium, letting his words sharpen. "For decades, Africa was told we were partners. But the deals? The contracts? The loans? All written in your favor. You gave us lectures, and in return you took our gold, uranium, cobalt, oil. You call that partnership?" Delegates exchanged looks, some uncomfortable, some impressed, some secretly thrilled to see someone finally say it aloud. Trump tried to regain control. "We helped build your countries." Traoré didn't let him finish. "No," he said. "You built extraction points. Not countries." Trump inhaled sharply, as if physically struck. Traoré continued, each word deliberate. "You built roads from the mines to the ports, not to the schools. You built pipelines to your ships, not to our homes. You built bases, not hospitals. You built deals, not futures. Trump's face reddened, frustration boiling beneath his skin. You're rewriting history, he snapped. No, Traoré said quietly. I'm exposing it. The room erupted with murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. The confrontation had shifted. Trump was no longer commanding the stage, Traoré was. Then Traoré leaned slightly forward and delivered the line that froze the entire hall. You claimed you made Africa, but without Africa, your economy collapses before breakfast. Trump looked stunned, eyes wide, lips parting but no words forming. And that's why you fear our independence, Traoré added. Because the moment Africa stops kneeling, the world has to stand on its own. The hall fell utterly silent. Trump's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to losing control of a room, especially not to someone half his age, standing without notes, without hesitation, and without fear. You're delusional, Trump snapped, gripping the podium with both hands. America built the global system. Without us, the world collapses. Including Africa. Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Trump the way a general studies an opponent's final, desperate move. The world you built, Traoré replied, works only for you. That is why it's collapsing already. Trump scoffed loudly, but Traoré kept going, his voice steady and sharp. You think dominance is stability. You think control is peace. But all your system has created is hunger, war, and debt, while you call it aid. Trump's face reddened. Delegates leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Everyone sensed the moment tightening like a drum. You say Africa needs America, Traoré continued. Yet every time Africa stands on its own, you panic. Trump raised a finger. We don't panic. You invaded Iraq out of panic. You sanctioned nations out of panic. You funded coups out of panic. And now you threaten Africa, out of panic. The room froze. Trump's mouth opened, but Traoré delivered the blow before he could speak. You fear the day Africa no longer needs you. And that day is today. Trump stepped back slightly, just one step, but enough for the cameras to catch it. Traoré's tone lowered, gaining gravity. You say, know your place. But I burned that place down the moment I understood it was built to keep us beneath you. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. And now, Traoré finished, Africa is building its own place, and you cannot enter unless we open the door. Trump looked around the room, hoping for support, but even his usual allies seemed uncomfortable. Some avoided his eyes. Some looked at Traoré with newfound respect, or fear. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Trump had come to dominate the conversation. Traoré had taken the stage and rewrote the rules. Let me be clear, Traoré said, one hand resting lightly on the podium, Africa kneels to no one. Not to flags. Not to empires. Not to history. He paused. Just long enough to make Trump look up. And certainly not to you. The room erupted. Applause. Gasps. Cameras flashing. Chaos rising. Traoré simply stepped back, calm and steady, as if everything he had said was nothing more than the truth spoken plainly. Because to him, it was. The applause didn't fade, it multiplied. Delegates from Asia, Latin America, and the African Union stood on their feet. It was the kind of reaction Trump expected for himself, not for a young African captain who had turned the global stage into his battlefield. Trump raised his hand, trying to silence the room. Sit down, he barked. But the delegates didn't listen. Traoré, however, lifted his hand gently, just a small gesture, and the room quieted almost instantly. The contrast was humiliating for Trump. Influence wasn't something you demanded, it was something you commanded. And Traoré had just proven who held it. Trump stepped forward again, determined to claw back control. You talk big, Trump said, voice trembling with irritation. But Burkina Faso is nothing compared to the United States. You don't have our power. You don't have our economy. You don't have our... Traoré cut him off, calmly. We don't have your prisons overflowing with minorities. We don't have your cities burning from inequality. We don't have your history of invading countries and calling it liberation. The room stirred again. Trump pointed a finger at him. You're criticizing America, The greatest nation on earth? Traoré shrugged slightly. I'm describing America. If it bothers you, perhaps change the reality before you defend the image. Trump froze for a moment. He had never been spoken to like this on an international stage. Not by NATO. Not by the EU. And certainly not by a leader from a nation he underestimated. You think you're a hero? Trump spat. You're just a soldier from a poor country trying to act important. Traoré walked closer, stopping only a meter away, close enough for Trump to feel the heat of the confrontation. I am a soldier, Traoré said quietly. And that is why you should be afraid. Politicians argue. Soldiers act. Trump swallowed, his posture breaking for a split second. And I act, Traoré continued, for a people who have survived centuries of exploitation. You act for corporations who fear losing control. A wave of murmurs swept through the hall. Trump, desperately searching for footing, snapped. You're playing with fire. Traoré nodded once. Good. Fire is how you burn down old empires. The line hit the room like a lightning bolt. Even delegates who disagreed with Traoré found themselves unable to deny the force of his presence. His words didn't sound rehearsed, they sounded lived. Trump, realizing he was losing the narrative, leaned in and whispered with a trembling jaw. You'll regret embarrassing me. Traoré didn't blink. I didn't embarrass you, he replied softly. I revealed you. And for the first time in his political life, Donald Trump found himself speechless. Trump's silence didn't last long. His pride wouldn't allow it. He straightened his jacket, inhaled sharply, and turned back to the audience as if nothing had happened. Look, he said, forcing a smile, I'm just trying to remind this young man how the world works. The US keeps global order. Without us, chaos wins. A few of Trump's usual allies nodded, but the majority stayed still, waiting for Traoré's response. They knew the tension wasn't over. Traoré was a strategist, he never delivered his final blow early. Traoré took a slow step toward the center of the stage. Global order, he repeated. Or global obedience? Trump blinked, thrown off by the simplicity of the question. Traoré continued, voice carrying across the hall. You call it order when you control the world's resources. You call it security when you send drones to villages. You call it leadership when you dictate who gets to live free. He raised one finger. But when Africa stands up. When we refuse to be mined, used, and commanded. You call it chaos. Delegates murmured in agreement. Trump clenched his fist. You should be thanking us. Trump shouted. We gave your nations aid, protection, investment. Traoré cut him off cleanly. You gave us chains disguised as gifts. The room shook. Trump's face tightened, fury boiling beneath the surface. You think you're tough? You think you can threaten us? Trump barked. You're walking on thin ice. Traoré stepped even closer, so close the tension felt physical. The difference, Traoré said softly, is that you fear falling. Africa has fallen before. We learned to rise. You haven't. Trump's expression flickered with something rare, uncertainty. Traoré didn't give him time to recover. You say we exist because of you, he continued. But your wealth was built on African minerals, African labor, African suffering. Another step forward. So tell me, Mr. Trump. If Africa stopped giving, what would America be? Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Traoré's voice lowered, almost whispering. You don't want Africa to remember its power. Because when we do, your system collapses. The hall erupted again, gasps, whispers, shifting alliances forming right in front of the cameras. Trump's breathing grew heavier. The reality hit him, he wasn't simply losing an argument. He was losing the narrative, the stage, and the illusion of dominance he had walked in with. Traoré finished with a gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. You warned me to know my place. I destroyed that place. Now I stand in my own, and you cannot enter. Trump looked around desperately for support. But the world was no longer looking at him. They were looking at the soldier who had rewritten the conversation. The atmosphere inside the assembly hall had shifted completely. Delegates who once tiptoed around Trump's temper now leaned forward with curiosity, even admiration. Toward Traoré. The young captain had done what world leaders rarely dared, confront American power directly, without trembling. Trump, sensing his grip slipping, attempted to recover with a loud, confident tone that didn't match the unease in his eyes. You talk like Africa is some rising force, he said. But without our money, our military, our trade systems, you wouldn't even be here. Traoré turned toward him slowly, shoulders squared, posture unshakable. I'm here, he said, because your system failed. And people like me were born from the failure you created. Trump blinked rapidly, unprepared for the weight of the words. Traoré continued. You keep repeating the same message. We built the world. We keep it alive. But you forget to mention the cost. The lives buried beneath the buildings, the nations drained to fuel your economy, the children robbed of futures to keep your markets running. Trump shook his head. You're exaggerating. America does more good than harm. Traoré stepped closer, voice rising with purpose. Then why are there more U.S. military bases in Africa than hospitals you helped build? Why does every aid package come with political strings? Why does every promise of partnership end with your companies owning the minerals? Trump's jaw tightened. Business is business. Traoré nodded slowly. And justice is justice. The difference is that Africa has learned to choose the second over the first. A ripple of applause broke from the African bloc. Trump glared in their direction. You think this is some kind of win? Trump snapped, voice cracking with frustration. Talking big doesn't make you powerful. Traoré raised his chin. No. But truth does. Trump took a step toward him, finger raised aggressively. You're arrogant, kid, he growled. One day you'll realize the world is much bigger than you. Traoré didn't move an inch. And one day, he replied, you'll realize Africa is much bigger than you imagined. Gasps filled the room. Trump's voice dropped lower, desperate. You really believe Africa can stand without us? Traoré answered not with anger, but with conviction. We already are. The only people who don't see it are the ones who fear it. The line landed like a strike. Trump froze again, this time unable to hide the fear flickering behind his expression. Traoré delivered the finishing blow of the moment. You wanted to intimidate me with your place in the world, he said. But places built on domination eventually crumble. Africa's place is built on survival. And that makes us unshakable. Silence overtook the room. Not because the conflict ended, but because everyone understood. Traoré had just shifted the global conversation. Permanently. Trump's frustration had reached its peak. His face flushed red, his breathing faster, his confidence thinning with every word Traoré spoke. He wasn't just losing an argument, he was losing the aura of dominance he carried into every room. He slammed a hand on the podium. This is ridiculous, he barked. I'm not going to stand here and be lectured by some soldier from a country we helped build. Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he offered Trump a calm, almost pitying smile. Helped build, he repeated. Or helped exploit. The hall erupted with murmurs. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward, sensing history rewriting itself. Trump pointed sharply at Traoré. You owe us respect. Traoré stepped toward him, closing the distance with quiet authority. Respect, he said clearly, is earned. Not demanded. And certainly not by nations who hide their violence behind speeches of freedom. Trump froze, caught off guard by the directness. Traoré continued. You call yourself the leader of the free world. Yet freedom is the first thing you take from others. You defend democracy by overthrowing governments. You protect peace by selling weapons. You speak of human rights while turning a blind eye to suffering when it benefits you. Trump opened his mouth but Traoré didn't let him breathe. You warned me to know my place, he said, his voice deepening, but your place was built on the backs of others. My place is built by my own people. The line hit Trump like a slap. Delegates exchanged glances, some even smirking, realizing the symbolic reversal happening before their eyes. Trump's voice turned shaky. We're still the most powerful nation on earth, he said. And you should remember that. Traoré's response was cold and surgical. Power isn't measured by how much fear you create, he said. It's measured by how many people stand with you when the fear disappears. Trump paused. Around them, for the first time, no one rose to defend him. No allies stepped in. No applause shielded him. He was alone, exposed. Traoré continued. You see yourself as a giant. But giants fall harder. You see Africa as weak. But those who endure suffering learn to rise stronger than those who caused it. He leaned forward, looking Trump directly in the eyes. You're terrified of a world where Africa no longer kneels. But that world is already here. A sharp silence cut through the room. Trump swallowed hard, visibly shaken. Traoré straightened his posture, delivering the final blow of the moment. You claim you made Africa, he said. But Africa is about to show the world what it becomes without you. It was a declaration, a prophecy, and a warning all at once. And for the first time in the entire assembly, Trump looked genuinely afraid. The tension inside the hall reached a breaking point. Reporters could feel it. Delegates sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing a diplomatic exchange or the moment a global power dynamic shattered. At the center stood two men, one clinging to a fading empire, the other rising with the momentum of a continent behind him. Trump tried to recover his posture. He forced a stiff smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. You talk big, he muttered. But one day you'll realize you can't win against the United States. Traoré's reply came without a heartbeat of hesitation. I'm not trying to win against you, he said calmly. I'm winning without you. That single sentence sent a visible ripple through the room. Trump blinked, slowly, like a man absorbing a blow but refusing to admit the pain. Traoré took a step closer, not threatening, but towering in presence. His voice dropped to a tone meant only for Trump, yet somehow loud enough for the entire hall to hear. You think countries kneel to your flag because you are powerful. They kneel because they were never allowed to stand. A gasp spread among diplomats. You warned me to know my place, Traoré continued. But my place is chosen by my people, not assigned by yours. And when you tried to intimidate me, when you shouted, know your place, I didn't just ignore it. He leaned in. I burned that place down. Trump recoiled slightly, his composure cracking. The camera zoomed in on his unsettled expression. Traoré raised his voice, not shouting, but commanding with the force of a leader forged in fire rather than privilege. I stand here as a soldier who became a president. You stand there as a president who behaves like a frightened man. Trump's jaw tightened. His hands shook, just enough for the cameras to catch. Traoré continued. You wanted the world to see you humiliate Africa. Instead, the world just watched Africa expose you. A hum of shock filled the chamber. Then Traoré delivered the verdict, the line that would replay across news channels, TikTok edits, and political debates for weeks. You don't decide the place of Africa anymore. Africa decides yours. The room exploded, not with applause, but with stunned silence. The kind that follows a truth too sharp to ignore and too powerful to deny. Trump stepped back. His confidence vanished. His authority slipping like sand through trembling fingers. Traoré didn't look at him again. Instead, he addressed the entire assembly. The era of kneeling is over. The era of answering back begins now. He walked out of the hall, leaving a shaken Trump behind and a world realizing something had changed. Not subtly. Not quietly. But unmistakably. A soldier had stood against an empire. And the empire blinked first.